Have you ever wondered what happens after death? What if someone came back with an urgent message from Jesus telling them that August 2025 is their generation's last chance? Today, you'll meet Ethan Cole, who died for 21 minutes and saw the future of humanity. Like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments which city you're watching from, so we can see how far this warning is reaching. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 28 years old and I live in Dallas, Texas. On the day August 2, 2025, I woke up thinking it would be just another ordinary Saturday. The typical Texas heat was already heavy even before 8 a.m., and the sun was burning as if it wanted to penetrate the windows of my apartment. I had simple plans: grab a quick coffee, review some work documents, and then meet up with some friends. Nothing extraordinary, or so I thought. The clearest memory I have of that early morning is the eerie silence. Not the usual silence, but a void of sound, as if the world were holding its breath. I left the house, got in my truck, and started driving down I-35. The sky was too clear, too blue, like a stage set for something I didn't yet understand. Then it happened. A metallic sound, a flash, and then nothing. I later discovered that a truck with no brakes had crossed the median and hit me head-on. The collision was brutal. They say my body was thrown against the steering wheel with such force that there was no chance of survival. At the hospital, my medical record marked total cardiac arrest at 9:42 a.m. My heart wasn't beating. My brain was inactive. Doctors were about to declare me dead when, unbeknownst to anyone, my consciousness awakened. But not in this world. There was no darkness, no tunnel. The first moment of my death was as if someone had ripped a black cloth from over my eyes and placed me in the center of a living space. The ground was made of something that felt like solid light. The air had weight, but it wasn't heavy. It was dense with presence. And in front of me, a light began to take shape. It didn't come from one point here, but from everywhere at once. That's when I realized that this light knew me. It didn't just know my name. It knew everything I'd ever done, thought, felt. My chest filled with an unbearable heat. I wanted to fall to my knees, but I didn't know if I still had knees to fall to. It was then that he appeared. There was no doubt. I didn't need to ask. Era, Jesus. He walked toward me, and each step was like a silent explosion of peace and awe. I felt I was standing before the one who sustained the entire universe and, at the same time, before a friend who knew me better than I knew myself. And it was at the moment he stood before me that the impossible happened. He didn't just speak, he shouted my name. Ethan. His voice didn't echo in the air. It exploded inside me, as if it were engraved in every molecule of my being. And then, without any introduction, he said something that would make my spirit tremble. August 2025 is your generation's last chance. My heart, or whatever I had in it, nearly stopped again. When those words came out of Jesus' mouth, August 2025 is your generation's last chance. I felt as if the light floor beneath my feet began to pulse, as if reacting to the urgency of the message. I tried to ask what that meant, but before my mouth could move, the scenario has changed. There was no smooth transition. It was as if someone had ripped the fabric of reality around me, and suddenly I was above a city. I recognized the streets, the buildings, the traffic. It was Dallas. But something was different. I didn't just see the physical world. It was as if a second world, invisible to human eyes, was superimposed on the first, and what I saw chilled me to the core. On the sidewalks, between cars, inside houses, dark creatures, they moved. They weren't grotesque monsters like in movies, but living, distorted shadows, their forms shifting with every moment. They leaned over people, whispering things I couldn't hear but recognized by the immediate effect. Faces growing heavy, gazes colder, breathing quicker, gestures more violent. In contrast, there were also figures of light. They were more defined, almost human, but with a luminosity that didn't hurt my eyes. These figures reached out to touch people, enveloping them with a soft glow, sending waves of peace and clarity. Some people reacted, stopping, looking up, as if they'd sensed something, but quickly hurried back, ignoring the touch. Jesus was beside me, and without moving his lips, his voice took over me. This battle has never stopped, Ethan, but August 2025 is different. The battlefield is more open, and each person's choices this month will define eternal paths. Below us, I saw a woman stopped at a traffic light. A shadow whispered in her ear, and suddenly tears began to stream down her face. A figure of light approached, touched her shoulder, and for a moment, the shadow retreated. The woman took a deep breath, as if trying to react. But the light changed. She accelerated, and the glow faded. You see, Ethan? Free will is the key. I can send my messengers, but each heart must decide whether or not to open. I looked at the city once more and noticed something even stranger. There were invisible wires over the buildings, like strings of light and dark intertwining. Where light predominated, there was music. Not earthly music, but a harmony that seemed to align every atom of space. Where darkness dominated, the sound became deep, heavy, suffocating. Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder. Time is not what you think. August is a turning point. After it, the spiritual atmosphere will change. Many who could hear me now will no longer hear me. At that moment, I realized it wasn't just a warning, it was a deadline. As soon as Jesus spoke about the convergence point, I felt the air around us grow denser, as if we were about to pass through something invisible. Suddenly, the city scenery disappeared, and before us appeared something impossible to describe in human words, a living timeline. It wasn't a calendar, nor a clock. It was as if the very fabric of history was spread out before us. In the center, glowing as if in golden flames, was the month of August 2025. It pulsed like a beating heart. Each pulse sent out waves of light that spread back and forth, influencing everything before and after. From the central point, two paths extended. One, the path of light, golden, sparkling, full of movement. In it, I saw people hugging and crying with joy, families reconciling, churches overflowing with life, entire communities being transformed. Even nature looked different. Clearer rivers, clearer skies. It was as if the world had taken a deep breath after centuries of suffocation. 2. The path of the shadow, thick, black, too silent. There, the streets were empty or filled with hardened faces. People passed one another without looking at each other. There was a chill in the air that almost burned. And in the distance, I saw walls of darkness closing in, swallowing entire neighborhoods, and no one reacted. Jesus pointed to the bright August line and said, "Everything here depends on what happens now. I offer every heart the chance to change its path, but I cannot force it. This month is the last window for most to make that choice without the darkness already suffocating them." As he spoke, I realized that time was not fixed. The line moved and shifted before me, as if reacting to decisions being made at that very moment in the physical world. Each time someone turned to God, the path of light advanced a little further. Each time someone closed themselves off, the shadow gained ground. There was a sound accompanying this vision, not music, but something like a double beat, one side light and harmonious, the other heavy and dragging. And I understood. The battle was not just for souls, but for the very course of history. Then Jesus turned to me. His eyes held the pain of someone who loves deeply and sees someone on the edge of a precipice. "Ethan, when August passes, the atmosphere will change. Those who refuse now will have harder hearts and deafer ears. You need to say this as if it were the last thing you ever do." The light around me began to waver, as if time were speeding up, and I knew what would come next would be even harder to see. The timeline began to recede, and in its place appeared something that resembled a vast field, so vast that the horizon disappeared into a golden haze. The ground was alive. Every leaf, every grain of earth seemed to emit a glow of its own. Jesus looked at that field and said, "This is harvest time. August 2025 is poised to be like few other moments in history. What is gathered now will remain forever. What is left will be lost." Suddenly, I saw thousands of people working in the fields. Some harvested with joy, singing, and each fruit they picked transformed into a beam of light that rose to the sky. Others, however, walked distractedly, their eyes fixed on shiny objects that disintegrated at the touch. I noticed something disturbing. The camp gates were open, huge gates of light that anyone could pass through. But in the background, I saw doors of darkness starting to move slowly, as if they were going to close all at once. I asked, without speaking, but with my heart, "Why not call them harder?" Jesus looked at me, and his face filled with pain. "I call you every day, Ethan, but my love does not imprison. He who enters here enters because he chooses, not because he was forced. This freedom is the greatest gift, and also the most terrible burden. With each passing minute, I saw people running toward the field, passing through the doors of light, and being greeted by luminous figures who embraced them. But I also saw people standing at the edge, hesitating, looking back as if there was still something more important to pursue. And then, I heard a deep sound, a dull rumble, like a wall being closed. One of the darkness doors moved a few more feet. The field shook. Jesus spoke with an urgency that made my entire being tremble. When these doors close, many who could enter now will no longer enter. August is the last month the field will remain so open. Afterward, the weight of darkness will increase, and hearts that now feel my touch will grow cold and deaf. I saw then the vivid contrast. Those who accepted the call were enveloped by a light that penetrated to the very core, transforming them from within. Smiles broke out even on faces that had previously held years of pain. Those who refused began to lose color. Their contours became more opaque, and shadows crept up their feet, gradually covering them. This vision began to burn in my mind, and I realized that I was seeing not only eternal destiny, but the immediate effect of choices at this very moment. When I looked at Jesus, he didn't look away. His voice was soft, but charged with power. You, Ethan, have seen what many will not see until it is too late. Come back and tell the truth, even if they call you crazy. The field began to disappear, and I knew we were heading for the hardest place of all. The golden glow of the field dissolved before my eyes like smoke carried by the wind. In its place was a scene so heavy that I felt as if the air had been knocked out of my lungs. We were flying over a city, but it wasn't like the Dallas I'd seen before. The streets were covered in a constant gloom, as if the sun had never risen. It wasn't night, but it wasn't day either. It was a suffocating twilight. People walked with their eyes downcast, shoulders slumped, as if carrying an invisible weight. There was no conversation, no laughter. The sound that dominated the air was a low, almost imperceptible hum that penetrated the bones and gave the sensation that something was corroding reality itself. And that's when I realized the luminous figures had disappeared. In their place, shadow creatures moved freely. Now they didn't just whisper. They screamed, laughed, and pushed people around like puppets. Jesus looked at me, and his gaze was steady but filled with sadness. This is what the world looks like when it closes its door on me. Love will still be available, but the spiritual climate will be like ice for most. Those who refuse now will hardly listen later. I saw a child sitting on the curb, crying. A woman walked past her without even noticing. A man fell to the ground, and people swerved around him as if he were invisible. There was no explicit hatred. There was absolute indifference, and that was even scarier. On the horizon, I noticed an immense wall of darkness. It didn't move fast, but it moved steadily forward, swallowing everything. Wherever it passed, buildings lost color, trees withered, and people simply ceased to exist. They didn't fall. They didn't scream. They just vanished into the air like dust. I felt a pressure in my chest, a desperate urge to scream for everyone to run, but no sound came out of my mouth. Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "This wall is not a physical event. It is the natural consequence of hearts that close. When love is rejected long enough, the light withdraws and emptiness takes its place." I looked at him, trying to understand. "Is this already happening?" He replied without hesitation. "Yes, but August 2025 is the last month it can be stopped with a single leap of faith. After that, every inch will require 10 times the effort." The wall advanced slowly, but in my mind I knew she wouldn't stop alone. It was at that moment that the vision changed again, and I felt we were about to see the other side of the story. What would happen if the light won in this decisive month? The darkness that enveloped us began to dissipate like smoke in a strong wind. I felt the air change, lighter, purer, and a wave of gentle warmth coursed through me. Suddenly, we were over a city again, but this time, everything was different. The sky wasn't just blue. There were shades of gold and silver that seemed alive, moving like silk in the light. The ambient sound was made of voices, laughter, and music. Not music produced by instruments, but a coro natural, as if the air itself sang. On the streets, I saw people hugging, helping each other. Strangers stopped to chat like old friends. The doors of houses were open, and the smell of food wafted freely, inviting anyone to come in. I saw children running safely, elderly people walking with dignity, young people working side by side, building something together. There was a clarity in people's eyes that made me understand. They weren't just surviving, they were truly alive. And it wasn't just humans who changed. Nature itself seemed renewed. Clean rivers, greener trees, flocks of birds flying fearlessly. The wind carried a freshness never before felt on earth. Jesus looked at all that and said, "This is what happens when hearts open. It's not just individual salvation, it's collective restoration. My light doesn't just transform people, it heals the world around them." The scene changed to a large square. In the center, there was a fountain that did not gush water, but liquid light. People came from all directions to drink of this light, and each time someone drank, a visible transformation took place. Wounds disappeared, tears became smiles, and hardened expressions softened. I asked, and with my heart, "Is this heaven?" Jesus smiled, but shook his head. "No, this is earth, when my kingdom is received. It is a preview of what is to come, but this version only exists if the door of August 2025 is crossed now. After that, that path will become narrower and more difficult." I looked at the horizon and noticed something shining, waves of golden light spreading out like tides, covering cities, fields, and mountains. Each wave was accompanied by a distant trumpet sound, as if the universe itself were celebrating. And then I realized, this vision wasn't just meant to inspire me. It was to give me an even greater weight, the weight of knowing that something so beautiful was within reach. But it depended on the choices made now. Jesus turned to me with eyes that mixed hope and urgency. Show them the contrast. Make it clear that the difference between darkness and this light begins with a single step, and that step needs to be taken this month. Before I could respond, I felt like we were about to get into the most personal part of the whole revelation. The glorious vision of the renewed city began to slowly dissolve, as if it were a watercolor painting being washed away by rain. The surrounding scenery became neutral, almost colorless, and I realized we were no longer in any specific physical or spiritual place. We were in a space that seemed to exist solely for this conversation. Jesus stood before me. There were no blinding lights, no heavenly choirs in that moment. Just him, looking directly at me. And that simplicity made the scene even more intense. "Ethan," he started, "you always thought your life was ordinary, that there was nothing extraordinary about you. But every detail of your story was prepared for this moment." Images began to form around us. Me, a child, sitting alone in the backyard, imagining worlds. Me, a teenager, obsessed with proving everything with logic and data. Me, as an adult, avoiding conversations about faith because I didn't have enough evidence. Your thirst for proof, your resilience, even your coldness at times. All of this is part of why you were chosen. Many who hear your voice think as you did. They won't be convinced by empty speeches, but by real testimony. That's why you had to die. I felt a lump in my throat. He continued, "Your death was no accident. It was divinely scheduled. The impact, the minutes your heart stopped. Everything was coordinated so that you would arrive here and see what you saw, right now, in this critical month." Then he showed me something even more personal, an invisible thread connecting my life to countless others. Like intertwined threads of light, I saw the faces of people I didn't know, but who would somehow be touched by my testimony. Some were in other countries, others just a few blocks from where I live. Every word you speak will carry seeds. Some will fall on fertile soil immediately. Others will seem to fade away, but will germinate years later. Your job isn't to force growth, it's to sow the seeds now, before the wind changes. At that moment, I felt a pressure in my chest, but not pain. It was as if something were being deposited inside me, a weight, but at the same time, a flame. I understood that it wasn't just a message to tell, it was a responsibility to carry. Jesus then said something that stuck with me like fire. "When you return, some will mock, they will laugh, they will say it was a dream, a delusion. But remember, I too was rejected. Don't speak to convince, speak to sow. The rest is up to me." I felt the ground, or what felt like the ground, vibrate slightly, and I realized we were about to enter the most intense moment, the revelation of what would happen. With each person, whether or not he chose to respond to this call in August 2025, the neutral space began to open like a veil being pulled back, revealing two distinct scenes before us. These weren't metaphors. They were realities so concrete that I could feel the atmosphere, hear the sounds, and even smell each place. To the left, a valley bathed in soft light. It wasn't a blinding glare, but a clarity that penetrated the soul. People walked freely, some running to hug family members. Smiles were so sincere they seemed to add years to their faces. I saw children playing, elderly people with firm steps, young people working side by side, as if all rivalry had disappeared. In the air, there was a sound like wind passing through leaves, but this sound carried peace. Jesus said, "Thus live those who have opened their hearts to me during this month. They receive a peace that cannot be taken away by circumstances. They become like flaming torches, illuminating even the darkest places in the world." I looked closer and realized that every person there had something like a flame in their chest, burning continuously. "This flame," he explained, "it is my presence in them. Even when they face difficulties, this light does not go out. It grows, and others come closer to it." To the right, however, I saw a completely different landscape. The ground was dry and cracked, and a cold wind cut like blades. People walked alone, staring at the ground, oblivious to others. Some reached for objects that crumbled to dust as soon as they were touched. The silence there was disturbing. There were no cries of pain, and that was worse. It was as if they had given up even on feeling. Jesus looked at that scene with deep sadness. It wasn't I who took their light away. They rejected it. August 2025 offered an open door like few others in history. But when it closes, the heart that was once almost ready becomes hard as stone. They can still find me, but each step will require much more effort and much more time. In the background of this dark landscape, I saw human figures slowly being covered by a dense shadow, like smoke becoming solid. When the shadow completely covered them, they simply stopped moving, as if frozen in time. I looked back at the scene of light and saw something opposite happening. Each person who received the flame in their heart became able to light other flames around them, with just a touch, a word, a gesture. It was living multiplication. Jesus then turned to me, his eyes reflecting both realities at once. "Now you understand, Ethan. There is no middle ground. August is the line. Every heart crosses or turns away, and when it passes, nothing will be the same." I felt the next vision would be the most profound of all, the very moment when the door would close. Suddenly, everything around was absolutely silent. It wasn't an absence of sound. It was as if even the air had ceased to exist. I felt the weight of expectation, as if something inevitable was about to happen. Before us appeared an immense door of light, tall as a building and wide as an entire avenue. It remained open, emitting a welcoming warmth that seemed to call every soul by name. People came from all directions, some running, some walking hesitantly. Each time someone crossed, a golden wave spread across the horizon. But as I watched, I noticed something unsettling. At the top of the door, there was a clock without numbers, just a slowly advancing pointer, and he was about to complete the lap. Jesus spoke in a deep voice. "This is the door of August. When the needle aligns, it will close on and will not open again this way for this generation." I glanced back and saw crowds still far from the entrance, distracted by small things, cell phones, idle conversations, worries about money and appearance. Some glanced toward the door but shrugged, as if there was plenty of time. The pointer moved forward. With just seconds left before closing time, I saw a final group running in desperation. Some made it across at the last minute, but others didn't. The sound that came next was not a bang, but a heavy sigh, like that of an entire world mourning at the same time. The door closed with a bright flash, and in the same second, the heat that had previously filled the air was replaced by a dry, biting cold. The people outside didn't seem to immediately realize what had happened. They continued walking for a few meters, talking, laughing, until slowly, like a candle losing its flame, the light in their eyes began to fade. Jesus looked at me. "Ethan, this is the moment I need them to understand. When August ends, it will be like this. Many will feel they still have time, but the atmosphere will be different. What today requires only a leap of faith will later require climbing an entire mountain." In the distance, I saw the figures of light that had been everywhere before slowly retreating, like soldiers leaving a battlefield after the final trumpet blast. It wasn't abandonment, it was compliance with the order. Time was up. I felt a deep almost physical pain, as if every person left outside was someone I knew. And then I realized, soon, these people would indeed be familiar faces to you and me. The weight of this revelation was so great that my knees felt weak, and it was at this point that Jesus took me to the final scene, the return to my body, and the responsibility to carry that message. The closed door remained before me for one last second, like a burning brand in my mind. Then the entire scene began to fade, as if made of dust of light being carried away by an invisible wind. I looked at Jesus. He was still there, motionless, but his eyes said it all. Time was too short to hesitate. He placed his hand on my chest, and I felt a warmth that didn't burn, but seemed to fill me to the last empty space. Ethan, when you come back, remember, it's not about convincing everyone. It's about reaching those who are ready. Speak as if every word is your last, because it just might be. Before I could respond, a force pulled me back. So fast I felt like I was passing through layers of reality. The colors faded, the sound vanished, the heat was replaced by a biting cold, and then, pain. A lot of pain. My eyes opened to a harsh white light. I heard confused voices, running footsteps, machines beeping. "He's back. We have a pulse," someone shouted. The air rushed into my lungs like fire, and I realized I was lying on a gurney, surrounded by nurses and doctors with shocked expressions. Every muscle in my body ached, but nothing compared to the weight on my chest. Not physical, but spiritual. I knew I had seen what few have ever seen. He knew he had been sent back not to start life over, but to carry a message with a deadline. I tried to speak, but my voice failed. In my mind, the images still burned. The harvest field, the wall of shadows, the city transformed by light. The moment the door closes, the nurse smiled, saying something about a miracle, but I barely heard. My mind was already on what was coming next. I needed to talk. Jesus had said that some would mock, call it madness, and try to explain it all away with science and statistics, and I had no doubt that this would happen. But I also knew that somewhere, someone would hear, and walk through the door before it was too late. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the irregular beating of my newly resurrected heart. He was no longer the same man who had entered that road on the morning of August 2nd. Now, every day, every conversation, every breath carried eternal weight, because I knew, with a certainty that no doubt could erase, that August 2025 was not just another month, ere the last call of a generation, and when the door closed, there would be no other like it in this life. If you enjoyed this beautiful spiritual testimony, please leave a like, comment, share your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.